You know, in the last desperate years of World War II, the Third Reich's factories started churning out some truly wild ideas. But one of them stands out, a weapon born from this crazy mix of engineering genius and pure delusion. We're talking about a machine so huge, it wasn't really a tank. It was a moving fortress, a literal battleship on treads. This is the story of the Landkreuzer P1000, the monster they nicknamed the Ratte.
So to understand where the idea for a 1,000-ton tank even comes from, we've got to go back to the Eastern Front in 1941. The German Blitzkrieg, which was all about speed, just slammed into a wall of Soviet steel. Their T-34 and KV-1 tanks were a total shock. They were tougher, and they hit harder than anything the Germans had. And that reality on the battlefield created this urgent, almost panicked demand for something way, way bigger.
And that pressure built up fast. I mean, the shock of 41 leads directly to a meeting just a year later, where this unbelievable concept of a 1,000-ton land cruiser gets pitched right to Hitler himself. It's kind of crazy how quickly this went from being a problem in the field to a project with the Führer's seal of approval. By the end of that same year, the official drawings were already done.
Now, the guy behind this absolute beast was an engineer named Edward Grote. Grote had this reputation for dreaming up these incredible but often wildly impractical armored vehicles. A lot of his earlier stuff was shot down as just unbuildable. But in the superheated atmosphere of the Third Reich, with Hitler getting more and more obsessed with gigantic superweapons, Grote finally found someone who would listen to his vision. So during that key meeting on June 23, 1942, Hitler wasn't just interested, he was completely captivated. The insane scale, the overwhelming power, it was exactly the kind of miracle weapon he thought could change the entire course of the war. He gave it his personal blessing right then and there. And in that moment, the Rat stopped being a sketch and became a very real, official project.
So, what exactly did Hitler approve? Let's dig into the details of the design, because honestly, the numbers are what really take the Ratte from just a big tank into the realm of myth. First off, the weight, 1,000 tons. Let's put that into perspective for a second. The heaviest tank that was ever actually built, the German Maus, was about 188 tons. The Ratte was supposed to be over 5 times heavier than that. We're not in the heavy tank category anymore. This is basically a naval ship that decided to grow legs.
And the size was just as staggering. We're talking 35 meters long, and that's without the gun sticking out. That would have made it longer than a blue whale, the largest animal on Earth. It was going to be 14 meters wide and 11 meters tall. It's less of a vehicle and more like a moving piece of hostile architecture. And here it is, the actual official drawing from Krupp. When you look at this blueprint, you realize pretty quickly you're not looking at a tank anymore. I mean, look at that massive naval turret, the tracks that are 3 lanes wide. This thing was designed from the ground up to be a mobile fortress, a self-propelled coastal gun that could, in theory, dominate any battlefield it could manage to get to.
And the firepower was, well, there was nothing else like it on land. Its main guns were a pair of 280mm naval cannons, the exact same kind they put on the German battleship Gneisenau. These things could lob shells over 20 kilometers away and could basically vaporize any tank, bunker, or building known to man. And that was just the main event. It also had a 128mm anti-tank gun, a bunch of anti-aircraft guns, and machine guns everywhere.
Inside, it really was a land battleship. It needed a crew of up to 41 people. To get this 1,000-ton monster moving, the plan was to use 2 gigantic U-boat diesel engines. But here's the crazy part. It had plans for a full bathroom and a small bay for 2 reconnaissance motorcycles. That tells you everything. This thing wasn't designed for a quick fight. It was meant to operate on its own for long periods, just like a warship at sea.
Okay, so a machine like this seems totally invincible on paper, right? But as this fantasy started to take shape in blueprints and calculations, it ran smack into the cold, hard realities of physics, logistics, and actual military strategy. The dream was about to get a serious wake-up call. And that wake-up call had a name: Albert Speer. As Hitler's Minister of Armaments, Speer was the man whose job it was to turn all these fantastical ideas into actual working weapons. And when the plans for the Rat landed on his desk, he had to weigh the dream against the very real demands of a nation at war. And the whole process was quick and logical. The final plans show up at the end of 42. Speer and his team immediately started breaking it down, analyzing every single piece of the project. Not just, can we build it,
But what would it cost? And most importantly, would it even be useful? Their conclusion led to a decision in early 1943 that completely sealed the Ratte's fate.
The analysis basically uncovered a total logistical nightmare. Its weight meant it couldn't cross a single bridge in Europe, it had to crawl through rivers, it would absolutely shred any road it drove on, it was too big to move by train, the resources needed to build just one Ratte were astronomical, and maybe the killer argument was that its enormous size and slow speed just made it the world's biggest, juiciest target for Allied bombers who were already starting to own the skies.
You know, the German general and tank genius Heinz Guderian really summed it all up perfectly with this quote. He knew this project wasn't born from any kind of sound military thinking. It was a symptom of a leader's obsession with size, this belief that just being bigger automatically meant better, no matter how impractical it was. This quote just nails the fundamental flaw in the whole project.
And so, the Ratte was canceled. Not a single piece of steel was ever cut for a prototype. It remained what they call a paper panzer, but even though it never existed, its story was far from over. In a weird way, its legend was just getting started.
So in early 1943, Speer managed to convince Hitler to pull the plug. He just made the undeniable case that the same steel, the same factory space, and the same workers could produce an entire battalion of proven, effective Tiger tanks instead. Faced with that kind of logic, even Hitler had to agree. Project P-1000 was officially dead, forever stuck in blueprints and our imaginations.
But an idea this epic is bound to create some myths. The most popular one you'll hear is that a turret for the Ratte was actually built and used as a coastal gun in Norway. The reality is a little more simple. The guns in Norway were 280mm naval turrets, but they came directly from the battleship Gneisenau after it was damaged. Because it was the same type of gun, the legend just kind of grew from there and has stuck around for decades.
So in the end, the Landkreuzer P-1000 Ratte is still one of history's most amazing what-ifs. But its story really makes you ask a bigger question, right? Was this thing ever really a serious weapon of war? Or was it something else? A propaganda piece? A desperate fantasy? Maybe just a symptom of a regime collapsing under the weight of its own gigantic delusions?